This is a CBC podcast.
Now, 90% of people surveyed in St. John's are not satisfied with the food they can access. 67% of BIPOC residents have difficulty finding their cultural foods, and access to grocery stores and transportation to get food are ongoing issues. These are just some of the findings of the City of St. John's food assessment. The report was presented to Council's Committee of the Whole yesterday, and Sarah Crocker is Program Coordinator with Food First NL and lead on the food assessment. She joins us on the line now. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So before we get into the findings themselves, what did you hope to find through this community engagement phase of the assessment?
Yeah, thanks for having us on here. The idea of doing a food assessment is really to, look at some of the complex issues that are facing food in St. John's. And I think, obviously, in the last year, 2 years, we've had a lot of, emergency issues, but we know that there's a lot of room for collaboration and coordination, and then to see food embedded in the City of St. John's, different strategies and programs and policy.
And I understand you had what's called food animators to help with the groundwork in collecting the data. Can you tell us a bit about who they are and what their role exactly was?
Yeah. So there's so many ways we could talk about food in the city. We could think about trade. We could think about all the sort of facts about agriculture production. But we really wanted this process to be a community-led food assessment. So thinking about the ways we could scale a food assessment in the City of St. John's, one of the interesting things we did is we created kind of a cohort of food animators, people who are passionate about food and want to share that with others. So these were, in the first group, 10 volunteers. We had some training and networking opportunities and focused on community actions that they would take on in partnership with organizations.
So what were some of the highlights of the findings in the assessment?
Yeah, so in addition to the food animators and different focus groups and sort of networking opportunities to hear from people in St. John's, we also offered an online survey that was done in sort of February past, and we had over 800 responses. And what we were able to do was, because we had people's postal codes, we were able to map their area to the ward, so the area that would be representing, those residents on City Council, to look at some of the differences, to compare and contrast things that might be more on the neighborhood level with regards to food. So being able to look at the city as a whole was really interesting. But then when we broke it down by ward, different issues emerged. So you mentioned transportation, for instance. So we asked people, how did they most frequently get to the grocery store, or the most common way to get food? And kind of unsurprisingly, 75% of people are using their own personal vehicle, and the rest some combination of walking, busing, sharing rides. But when we looked by ward, there were some differences. In Ward 2, which is sort of more considered like downtown and central St. John's, only 60% basically were using their own vehicle, a lot more walking, biking, busing. But in Ward 5, more towards the West End, Kilbride, the Goulds, 86% of folks were using their own vehicle, and nobody indicated they were able to walk or bike to buy food.
So why are these findings in this report so important going forward?
Yeah, so obviously we have, a lot of conversations about transportation, creating pedestrian-friendly infrastructure in the city, about health and safety, about climate change. And what this does is, it puts kind of a food lens on some of the things like the City of St. John's is doing. So that's really interesting for, moving some sustainable public policy forward. But it also provides areas for community groups to take action. Maybe there's things in your neighborhood. Maybe there's also roles for businesses, because we also know that folks really wanted to see changes in retail availability of food as well.
And so what do you see as, I guess, some immediate things that can be implemented or policy interventions that you want to see happen just off the top of your head based on the assessment that's been done already?
Yeah, so I'm a program coordinator here at Food First NL, a lot of what we do is thinking about like networking with different food programs and stakeholders. And we really wanted to see where are the priorities for action. And something that really stood out to me is we asked people to rank their, top priorities. And number one, like across the board didn't matter how much your household income was, it didn't matter your age, the number one thing that people wanted to see was income solutions. So people really understood that access to food is about money. And so increasing wages, changing social assistance rates, doing work on any way that we can look at increasing incomes or decreasing, sort of the cost of living and equalizing that was the number one priority for people. And we heard that across the city. So that was really something we want to carry forward as we network with different partners and bring the food assessment to life.
Sarah, I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Ramraz.
Sarah Crocker is Program Coordinator with Food First NL and lead on the St. John's Food Assessment.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.